The longest running museum in the state of South Dakota is in Vermillion, right in front of the Dakota Dome. W.H. Over Museum started as a couple of cabinets at the university in 1883.
KTIV's Clayton Anderson explains how the museum has evolved and showcases natural history and the settlement of mankind.
The museum is named after one of its past curators, W.H. Over, who taught at the university and expanded the museum's collection. If you walk through the museum that is now privately funded, you will see many taxidermy animals and fossils representing wildlife of the past.
I realize there's so much knowledge. It's tough for people to just learn everything there is out there. And so I see part of the mission here is just to educate people. There's things here that people never think about or are unaware of.
The museum stretches a vast area and has many exhibits from various topics, like the history of the horse in North America and an exhibit about Hero the elephant, a circus elephant that was shot in the early 1900s in Elkton, South Dakota. After a 6.5-hour hunt, the elephant was claimed to be violent, and now the skeleton remains on display at the museum. At the W.H. Over Museum, you can expect to see a lot of different fossils, which actually shows South Dakota's history as a state that was once underwater. While South Dakota is sparsely populated, there has been a lot of immigration to the area, as well as a rich Native American heritage, all on display at the W.H. Over Museum.
I don't know. I think everybody that comes here seems to gain that appreciation of just the big sky, the big country, the sweeping horizons.
The museum lost public dollars years ago. Rainey says they are always creating new exhibits based on volunteers' ideas and expertise.
It depends on the interests and skill sets of the people that are putting their time in here. So, you know, we had somebody that ran a lumber yard, and a lot of the exhibits came about because he was into creating that kind of stuff.
That'll do it for this episode of Hometown History from the W.H. Over Museum on the University of South Dakota campus. Join us next time to see where we head next. From Vermillion, South Dakota, Clayton Anderson, KTIV News 4.